All right, there we go. Hello everyone, how's it going? Team here, and this is BxJS Weekly, episode 104, bringing you all the best JavaScript news of the week in a podcast form. And today I'm trying something a bit different, so I'm trying to stream on both Twitch and YouTube via the restreaming service, so please let me know if the quality is fine, if you can see and hear everything, if there's no problems. Highly appreciate that. Hey Mandaputra, welcome to the stream. I also need to figure out some sort of a setup with the chat, because the one I have right here on the screen is the Twitch one, and there's also a YouTube chat that is different, and there's no single digit for that. At least I couldn't find one so far. So we're gonna get there. You know what? I'm just gonna close this because it doesn't make sense to have that since, well, it's just half of the chat anyway. But anyway, let's just get started with the podcast, I guess. It's working. Great. Cool to hear that restreaming is actually working perfectly fine. Okay, so yes, I know some people have been asking me to stream to YouTube for quite some time, because apparently it works better in some places. So there we go. Hey Jan, welcome to the stream. First timer. That's really amazing. I mean, welcome to the live stream. But anyway, back to the podcasting. As usual, the first section we got is getting started. So we got a few articles here today that are pretty cool. The first one here is old-ish, but I think... no, wait, I'm confusing. This one is from February, so not that old, like a week old. It is from the DigitalOcean community, and it's titled Understanding Generators in JavaScript, and it's a really, really good introduction to the generator functions that were introduced in ECMAScript 2015. Now, I don't think I've actually used generators to date, but it is a very useful tool that is, basically it's very good to know that they exist, because one time you might need them, and then it's, it's just a good idea to know how they work and what exactly can you do with them. And this article does a very good job of, explaining what they are, how do you build your own, how do you use them, how do you consume them, how do you close them, and so on and so forth. So if you are interested in generators, or just expanding your horizons, I guess, within the new APIs for JavaScript, definitely do have a look. It's actually a pretty damn good article. Okay, next thing we got here is the new blog post from the V8 dev team, Understanding the ECMAScript Spec Part 2, where they talked about Part 1 a couple of podcasts ago. I don't remember when exactly, but it was there, right? And now this is the continuation of the series, and if you don't remember, so the article is essentially a deep dive into the ECMAScript spec, as in, how to read the spec, what does all these weird words and terms mean, and how do you understand what the spec talks about. So if you are, I don't know, if you for some reason need to read the spec, again, I already said that when I was discussing part 1, it can be very, very hard in the beginning, because there's a lot of, terms and things that they talk about that are very confusing. Well, in reality, they're relatively straightforward, but you just have to know what exactly they are talking about. So if you are interested in ECMAScript spec, do have a read through that. And again, if you haven't seen the part 1, read through that first, because this is sort of a continuation and it expands on what was mentioned in the part 1. But it is a great article, so quite highly recommended as well. All right, continuing, we got a new article from Mr. Ken Dodds. Stop using isLoading booleans. Now, this is one of those things that, sounds obvious when you see it the first time, but then when you start coding, you always keep using this isLoading thing, or is fetching, is whatever. Like there's like, I think I'm still doing that sometimes, and then catch myself and be like, okay, I have to refactor that doesn't look good. What is the alternative, you ask? Well, it's relatively straightforward. There's actually a better way. You just can set the status, because it's when you fetch something, when you load something, it's not just loading, right? There's actually more states to that. It can be loaded, it can be failed, it can be pending, and there's like a bunch of other possible states depending on the use case, and this is exactly what the article talks about. As usual, there's an example here using the React and use reducer hook in this case, so if that sounds interesting, do check it out. There's a bit more information here. Again, if you are interested in states and how do you phrase that correctly? Okay, if you're interested in modeling states around the states, that doesn't sound correct. Around the state, like, oh, man, okay, this is actually hard. How the hell do you properly say that in English? Anyway, if you're interested in state modeling, check out the XState. It's my new favorite state modeling library. I did a video on it just a few days ago, so if you're interested, do check it out. That went terrible. Anyway, Continuing, we got another article from the Log Rockets. The title is How to Create Randomly Generated Background with the CSS Paint API. And this is essentially a tutorial for the freshly added CSS Paint API that allows you to, well, do the drawing in JavaScript and then expose that as a CSS pattern, I guess, or background or whatever, and then use it within your CSS to, well, in this case, do a fancy JavaScript-based backgrounds that, that just, drawing on canvas and then using that within CSS. Nothing super fancy, but it's a pretty neat API and can help you in some cases. So if that sounds interesting, if you never heard about it, do check it out. It's pretty damn neat. And it's part of CSS 3, I believe. All right. Continuing, we got another article from LogRocket. This time around it's called the ES modules in Node.js today. So this talks about using ES modules, which is, the imports, exports, and all that stuff in Node.js without any flags, because the 13 ships them without flag. Today, the possible options, how do they interact with the common JS modules, and, kind of everything you basically have to know about using ES modules in Node and how to properly make them, forward compatible with the releases and backward compatible with common JS packages that you have out there right now, and all that kind of stuff. So if you are really interested in using ES modules right now, and there's actually a really good reason to do that, starting with Node 13.10, which we're going to talk a bit about later. And definitely check this article. It basically outlines everything you got to know about the changes to Node that was made to facilitate the ES modules and what you have to keep in mind, how does interop works, and all that kind of stuff. Hey Mati, welcome to the stream. Video version of the JavaScript weekly newsletter. What kinda? Yeah, it's kind of like this. But I try to be a bit more picky, I guess, about the articles I include. Anyway, continuing, the last article we got in the Getting Started section is Essential Docker for JavaScript and Front-End Developers. This is not strictly JavaScript. I mean, there is some mentions of JavaScript apps and stuff like this, but it's mostly about the Docker itself. So it's a really nice introduction to what Docker is, why do you need it, and how do you use it with your Node and front-end applications, including the basics of building images, pushing its images to the registry, running from images, executing commands within the image, and so on and so forth. So if you were wondering, what Docker is, how to actually use it when I'm a front-end dev, why do I need it, then this is a really good starting point. Hello to you, I guess, Korean person. I have no idea how to read that. I'm really sorry, but but welcome to the stream nonetheless. Okay, continuing, we got the next section, articles and news. We got quite a few here today, and some of them are really, really cool. So let's get cracking. The first article we got here is a tiny static full text search engine using Rust and WebAssembly. So this is a write-up that explores the way to create, as it says, tiny static full text search engine via the WebAssembly. So the author here first starts by, going through the creating a Bloom filters, and I think in Python in the original case, and then exporting the model, and then trying to figure out how exactly do you load this model in the browser and run the search via, that stuff. And then he comes down to, okay, so there's a WebAssembly. Then there's Rust that actually also has the Bloom filter module that allows you to do, well, basically the same. So you can actually write the Bloom filter search module, compile it to WebAssembly, and then just ship it to the browser and use it as is. Now, Bloom filter obviously has some limitations, as in, you cannot actually do the auto suggestions, for example, because it only searches for the full words. But it's a really nice approach to searching, really lightweight and pretty fast, as the snippets here show. So if that sounds interesting, do check it out. It's actually a really nice write-up on how do you do something like this using WebAssembly, essentially. So if you are curious, do have a look at the article. All right, next thing we got here is React Distros and the... let me try that again. React Distros and the deployment age of JavaScript frameworks. It's an interesting write-up that basically talks about React not being the framework, or rather compares React to something like OS kernel, and then things like create React app, Next.js, Gatsby, React Native, and so on and so forth, to the distros. You know, like if you take the Linux, we have the Linux kernel, and then we have like Ubuntu, Debian in the same manner, you know? It's a really interesting perspective on that. Like there's a lot of discussion here in terms of, you know, okay, so this is how the frameworks evolve, this is how we look at them, and here's the React distros. So there's actually a really nice collection of quite popular React distros, let's just put it this way, including, you know, React Native, Electron React, React 360 for VR, React Inc for the command line, Next.js, Gatsby, and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it because primarily because React tries to be this tool that is unopinionated, right? So you always, there's like always 10, 15 ways of doing things in React. And not all of them, or basically, I guess none of them are wrong, right? So it just depends on your approach. Donna, thank you very much for your donation. As usual, highly appreciated. And yeah, so this article basically touches on that idea that it's actually okay for React to be unopinionated, because then all those React distros can be opinionated and can change the way you build apps. Because like if you take Next.js and Gatsby, Next.js is now moving towards static rendering, which works, well, a lot like Gatsby, right? But they are doing it in a different way because Gatsby uses Graphical data layer while Next.js doesn't. So it's sort of, let me just do this real quick. It's very interesting, basically, very interesting perspective on the whole React ecosystem, I guess. If you are curious about more details, do check the article out. There is some interesting thoughts here and there. So I think it's definitely a very very good analogy between, you know, React being a kernel and Next, Gatsby, and Create React App being the distros. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I'm very curious. So like the author quotes the tweet from James K. Nelson that says, "I think we need more distros," which is an interesting idea because, you know, we already have a lot of amazing tools, as I already mentioned, you know, Next.js, Gatsby, like all of those are really, really cool. React Native, I love most of them. And while they are sufficient for some cases, it's obvious that we definitely wouldn't hurt to have more options, right? So this is like one perspective. The other perspective is that even though, like if you take Gatsby, for example, right, it does a really good job at static rendering. But there are limitations as well. So it's not like you can do anything you want with Gatsby, even if it can be statically rendered. So there's some caveats, there's some issues. We're going to have a look at one of them in the next article. And it's definitely, I would be very curious to see, you know, basically where React development takes us in the next few years, because it seems like this is the next major area that is going to change how we develop the app. So it's not the React itself, but rather those frameworks built around React that make it simpler, easier, nicer. I mean, Next.js was game-changing when it came out, right? So is Gatsby. So is Create React App, to be honest. So it's like, if you want to build a single page app, there's no easier way, I think. But yeah, this is kind of the gist. If you are curious to have a look, it's a pretty good one. Okay, the next article we got here is The Perils of Rehydration, eye-opening realization about Gatsby in React. So yeah, so this article talks about the Gatsby framework specifically and the rehydration of the pages that you serve from your server more specifically. The idea of rehydration is pretty simple. When you load the page, Gatsby by default serves the static stuff, right? So you load like HTML and then there's JavaScript in the end. And once the JavaScript runs, it rehydrates the React app so that it becomes like a proper React app and actually can do the React stuff, right? Now, the thing is that this rehydration comes with a bunch of caveats. And this article basically looks at one case when the rehydration screwed up with the markup and ended up showing the thing that should have been like outside of the main form within it, and you know, there's overlapping CSS and it just looks like crap, right? And all of that because of the minor rehydration problem. And then the author essentially goes diving into the code to figure out what exactly is the problem and how exactly do you fix that. So yeah, in this case, it was the fact that he tried to basically render it. So if there's no window, basically means if we are compiling it statically on a server, we're just going to return null instead of the element, right? And that is the problem. So that's literally one minor snippet with if closure that will break, well, some parts of your app. It's not always going to happen, but it is a very, very annoying thing that I think I stepped on. I stepped on this rake like multiple times when working with Gatsby and had to figure out the workarounds. There's a quick dive in server-side rendering here, explaining how exactly it works if you are not familiar with it. And then there's a solution to basically how you can work around this, or I guess one of the solutions. There's also nice examples from websites like Guardian or Airbnb, who basically use the same techniques. And there's a demo again with Gatsby that shows you the rehydration in process here with a very basic demo on slowed down connection, obviously, because if your internet is fast enough, you won't really see that. And yeah, so the stupidest way to do that is basically to use effect, which is, sounds really straightforward, but it's actually a lot more reliable than using the window because it won't trigger on the server-side rendering, right? And that's essentially will fix the problem. It's a very annoying thing, and I wonder if it could be solved on the React level. I'm guessing not really, right? So you have to somehow distinguish between the components, but maybe the client-only component that author ended up implementing here might be a part of React or server-side rendered framework that basically does that, because at least in my case, I always had some components that only had to work on the client because there was some stuff that was related to window or local storage or whatever that doesn't make sense to be executed essentially on the server side. But yeah. Hey Siddharth, welcome to the stream. Hey Small, god damn it, I for the life of me I cannot read your username. Small Brute, I guess. Welcome to the stream. All right. Yeah, so if you are curious about that, do check out the article. Again, it's a really, really good deep dive into the server-side rendering and the problems with client-only components rendered within Gatsby. So it's quite interesting. Hi, Krishna. Welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, we got creating the Microsoft Edge DevTools 3D view. Apparently, Microsoft Edge, the new one, is getting a 3D view that will look like this and show you all these sort of nice Z indexes in your page and how does the page looks in 3D so that you can figure out why the elements are overlapping or not overlapping, or why is your model under your body and stuff like this, which actually looks pretty cool. I think the first time I've seen something like this was in the what was it? The Firefox DevTools. I don't know if they have it still. I think I used it like once ever, but it's a really cool thing. Now this one is already in the Edge. So if I fire up the Edge canary, and if I open, I don't know, some Dev2 for example, and I inspect it, there is a 3D view now that you can open, and after a few seconds, it will actually render the page in 3D, and you can actually inspect it like this and click, get the elements, and get the DOM and everything. And it's just, it's really fancy. Let's just put it this way. Now, the article itself talks about how exactly did they implement that, which I think is a lot more interesting than, the tool itself, at least to me. Like, I get it, the tool is useful, and probably there are cases where you really need that, but in my life, I didn't really have too many of them, but the way they build it and the journey is really cool. So this, is a description of, coming from a basic prototype that just does it as a browser extension and going to the tab in a DevTools and then exploring how you can properly render the page components within those slices so you can actually see how the page looks with, popped out frames, and then merging it into the DevTools themselves, and it's fascinating. So if you are interested in development of things like this, and also, like 3D within the browser and rendering DOM, and then reaching the 60 FPS, which is also pretty damn hard, to be honest, do check this one out. So actually really, really interesting article. There's a lot of fascinating stuff in here, including the benchmarking this stuff with billions of elements. This looks just really cool. To trying and reach the 60 FPS without bottlenecking anywhere. And yeah, it's really fascinating. I cannot wait for this to be shipped in the main browser. Again, as I said, I probably will use it once or twice, but it's a really neat additional panel to have, basically. All right, continuing, we got future-proof. What is wrong with me today? Future-proofing Firefox JavaScript debugger implementation. Another write-up about dev tooling. This time around, again, this is from the Mozilla guys, talking about the SpiderMonkey debugger and its cleanup, so how it was implemented and cleaned up later on. So essentially, they've recently changed it, as far as I understood. And it starts with a brief history of the JavaScript debuggers, and then goes into a bit into garbage collection, how it works, and then the principles of doing that. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. So if you have even slightest interest in dev tooling, if you are curious how browsers do the whole debugging and stepping into functions, out of functions, the whole stack, showing you the stack and things like this, do have a look at this. It's quite fascinating. Look into how the SpiderMonkey works and how exactly does it, basically manage all the things that it have to manage to actually allow you to just put a breakpoint really in there and pause the code. It's really, really cool. So yes, again, if you're not interested in dev tooling, that's probably not the article you want to read, but I would still recommend it because it's just really good. Hey Tony, welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, we got the last article of the day here. It is from the REPL-IT team, and it's called CLUI, building a graphical command line. I personally absolutely love that idea. Now, though, the gist is that we have a bunch of different ways to represent the UI, right? So we have the old heavy UIs like you get in Adobe Premiere, or, well, any other tool that has top menu bars that have like billion nested menus that are pretty hard to navigate, and unless you go through a tutorial, you won't really know what the hell's going on, right? And then we got mobile UIs that are sort of very intuitive, especially the ones that's, Siri, where you can just talk to it. And then we got the command line UIs where you can literally just type stuff. And they sort of decided to merge the UI with command line to get approachability, discoverability, interactivity, and scalability all in one, right? And the result is this. So it's you still get the command line, but instead of just typing, well, you still can type. You also get those drop-down things with suggestions that allow you to just basically click on them and pick whatever you want. Now, I think they basically primarily build that for the REPL-IT itself, which is, perfectly fine. And there's a nice demo. Let me just show you this. So this is, again, part of REPL-IT. Hopefully it won't take too long to load. It does take some time to do that, but they have open sourced majority of the code that they've used to build that. There is a bunch of packages here. So if you want to build something like this on your own, do check out the open source projects on GitHub they have, because it will get you started pretty quickly. So yeah, this is the way it works. As you can see, you just click on it. Well, you can just type, right? But you can also click. You can also, what was it? I think it was, wait a second. Come on, where's my menu? There we go. I think it was, yeah, email. So if you hit email and run it, it will actually show you the full form right in the command line, which is something that I think is really neat. So this sort of merge of command line with Reach UI can be pretty damn powerful, like now that I think about it, So the idea is interesting to you. Do check it out. Again, there's examples, there's source code, there's reasoning for that. It's all very, very well thought through and pretty exciting. I wonder if someone will implement like a more ubiquitous library to do that. And I wonder if you can just do it in the command line itself. I mean, we had some, like the ASCII rendered UIs, but that's not quite the same, isn't it? I wonder if this would be the logical evolution of the hyperterm, which might as well be like one of the killer features for the JavaScript-based terminal that it was lacking, right? But yeah, anyway, it's a really, really exciting concept. So if that sounds interesting, do check it out. Okay, that is it for the articles in news today. Now we're coming to the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. we got a few things here. The first one is the scroll snapping after layout changes. So this is changes that come into CSS scroll snap, something that I honestly did not know existed before reading this article. So apparently you can actually use CSS to tell elements to, well, basically snap to scroll, right? So if you look at this example, if you do the gallery, if you enable scroll snap, it will basically snap to the positions, as in, you know, when you're doing like the carousel thing with JavaScript, which is quite neat. But it has some problems. For example, currently it does not preserve position if you change the orientation of the device, and resnapping is gonna basically fix that. So the Chrome 81 will ship with the resnapping after layout changes that will allow you to recalculate the position and make it nicer, essentially. And there's an example of a chat UI that does exactly that. So currently it works like you see on the right. So the new messages appear and nothing happens because the layout doesn't trigger, layout changes do not trigger resnapping. But the new version, if the author here starts typing, if you can see, the new version re-snaps automatically, which I guess you can just build the chat UI in like 2 seconds now by using like a few CSS entries, which is kind of great. So if that sounds interesting, there's a bit more details in the article. It's a pretty neat thing, so do check this one out. Right, next thing we got here is the filling when you discover document design mode. So that's a thing I did not know about, but apparently there's a property on document called design mode. And if you set that in your DevTools, you will enter the design mode that allows you to edit just about anything on a website, and it works anywhere basically. So if I go ahead and fire up inspect and just go to console and do document design modes on, whoops, no, that's the wrong button. There we go. I'm now in a design mode and I can just go ahead and edit the current tweet basically, you know, like add an emoji here or something, and faking tweets got a lot easier, I guess. But it's a really neat thing if you want to experiment with layouts. I honestly did not know that existed. I wonder if it's a Chrome specific thing, but neat one nonetheless. So if that sounds interesting, do check out the tweet, or I guess just check out the document.designMode. Anyway, continuing. We got another tip from Adios Money about Chrome DevTools. If you didn't know, and I personally didn't, you can actually block requests in the DevTools by using the top right menu, more tools, and request blocking, and then selecting which requests do you want to block. So you can basically test your code with specific requests failing without, you know, changing the server or anything. You can just block it in DevTools, and then see how your app behaves if something fails during the request, which is really cool. And I did not know about it, but I will definitely use that now because that sounds incredibly helpful. Right, next thing we got here is the new, or I guess not really new, but I only found out about it like a couple of days ago. ECMAScript proposal for syntax to import ES modules with attributes. I find this to be really neat. It's already stage 1 actually, and the idea is very simple. So we already have this sort of attributes for imports when we use Webpack, rollup, or whatever. You have this additional metadata that says that I want to import something as JSON, as image, as font, or whatever, right? We already have that in Webpack typically as prefixes to the URL. The idea here is to standardize that and allow those the attributes as keywords. So you can basically say import JSON as JSON, which will say tell the browser to load this thing as a JSON, or tell the tooling, I guess, to load that as a JSON if we're running in tools. Same goes for the dynamic imports and workers, which allow you to do it like as a WebAssembly. I think this is one of the primary motivators, I guess, for this, because we are going to get the WASI at some point, and you're going to be able to just import modules as WebAssembly, right, without any additional things, and just use the WebAssembly API as is, which sounds pretty good. So looking forward to see how fast this will get through, or once, maybe as the, what was it, what was the operator? Oh yeah, it was the decorators, right? This one was stuck in limbo for ages, and nobody knows if it will ever actually make it to the ES spec. But yeah, there we go. All right, last thing we got here for today in the tips and tricks is the small note that Node 1310 that just came out this week ships with a dual modules ability with no flags. So now when you write a package, you can expose both ES modules version and the CommonJS version together by using a bunch of fields in package.json. So you define a module as ES module, you define main as closure, CommonJS, closure, no. And then you just basically say that exports is, if you import it, it's going to be ESM. If you import default, it should be the CommonJS. So you no longer need MJS. You can just use the ES modules without that by following this pattern, which is pretty cool. And hopefully we're gonna see more adoption of ES modules in Node.js community soon-ish. Actually, should start and try and start writing modules in ES modules myself, because I haven't actually tried that so far. I'll always use require by the old memory in Node.js. Anyway, that is it for tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. Now we got a couple of releases. So the first one being Node 13.10 that we just talked about. Additionally, it introduces the async context API. So this is the async local storage, I believe is what it's called. And it allows you to use or to create a persistent storage that is sort of similar to a thread safe storages in threaded languages, which could be helpful in if you want to have something stored within one specific request and then disposed. It looks quite useful. I mean, probably will be only useful to those who write libraries, but nonetheless a pretty cool API. I think the second notable thing here is VM measure memory, which now works per context, does per context memory measurements instead of the whole thing, which could be helpful if you're doing like benchmarking and working in restricted environments and care a lot about memory. But yeah, that's about it. Okay, next release and the last release of the week we got here is P5JS 1.0. It is finally here. I think it's been, I think I first heard about P5JS years ago. Like, this thing is old. Like, I can't say exactly, but I remember reading about that a long time ago, way before I started doing JavaScript, like seriously. And it's a really nice library that allows you, as I say, creative coding. So it's basically you can do just about anything with it, starting from games and going to fancy visualizations, going to some interactive stuff, and that's like they have a ton of examples here. So if you're interested, there's a lot of really cool things. And now it's version 1.0 finally after all these years. But it's a really neat library, so if you're interested, do go through the changes here. They've even have their personal editor basically specifically for it, and a bunch of other stuff. So it's pretty cool. All right, that's it for releases. Now we got libs and demos. We don't have that many here, but there are some interesting ones. So the first one we got here today is the editor.io. And it's, as it says, the open source web editor you will love. It's a block-based and plugin-based, I guess, editor that allows you to, compose your own editor you want, including, it looks very similar to what you basically get on Notion, but I guess not as powerful as that. But still pretty neat with, draggable blocks and everything that you can rearrange, the plugins that you can extend. So there's a bunch of default plugins here, and yes, the page you see here is literally the editor, so you can just edit this the way you want, and then adding blocks, including text and features and whatever with in this case it's icons, but it's really neat. So if you are building a project that needs an editor, do check this one out. It's actually really cool. All right, continuing, we got meta typing. Now this one is crazy. I am, as you might know, not a huge fan of TypeScript. Like, I so far haven't seen a need to use it beyond, supplementary tooling like the VS Code does it to give a better auto-completion. But I know there's a really powerful language, and well, this repository basically proves it by implementing whole functions and algorithms purely with TypeScript type system. So it's not the TypeScript, it's the type system from TypeScript that implements functions and algorithms. It is as crazy as it sounds, and yes, there are actually stuff like, the basic math and lists and puzzles. They even have like binary trees implemented with TypeScript type system, which is just bonkers. So if you are interested, do check it out. It's a bit crazy, but there you go. All right, continuing, we got webcodesk. I'm not exactly sure how you read that. It's a web application builder that essentially allows you to reset to default demo. There we go. Do I have, yeah, I think I have to permit my JavaScript here. Come on, just reset and show me my stuff. This is basically what you see is what you get editor for, I believe, React components. Come on now, what's going on? You not happy with my ad block? Come on. I know you worked just a few seconds ago. There we go. Okay, yeah, so there's your live preview. You can select a component and then you can just edit it dynamically, change the state, change the sizes, and then there's basically templates which you can also edit and throw in the components. You can create a new page, throw in, whoops, that is a wrong button, right? And then you just throw in a bunch of components on that page. And you know, I mean, it works, right? So this is not the first one we've seen. It's not going to be the last one. Looks okay. Like there's a bunch of helpful things here. You can even write functions and stuff if you want to, including specs and everything, which seems convenient. So if you are working a lot with, I don't know, visual editing, I guess, maybe you need to provide tooling for someone else, do check this one out. Maybe this will help you in some form or shape. I mean, it looks like a nice project, but I personally don't see any need for this, at least in my cases. Right, continuing, we got cloudscraper. So this is a library to bypass Cloudflare anti-DDoS page. That's a, like, so here's the deal, right? On one hand, I understand the need for having the Cloudflare anti-DDoS thing that's, well, can be annoying, right? When your website is DDoSed and Cloudflare kind of saves you from that. On the other hand, having that makes it really hard to scrape information from the pages. And sometimes you just want to run like script once every day or whatever to just have a tiny updated thing or a bot who, you know, messages you when something changes on the website. And if that website uses Cloudflare, that's no longer possible, because if you use the convenient, like conventional means is what I want to say, you're not going to get past the basic Cloudflare screen, right? I mean, there are ways around it, but it's just annoying. Now, this library basically works around that. It solves the simple HTML JavaScript page challenge. It redirects to original website. It solves reCAPTCHA, and it handles the errors if you was banned and so on and so forth. So if you are scraping things and there's Cloudflare protection and you wanted to basically, scrape that as well without too much problems, do check this one out. It actually seems like a very nice project and quite actively maintained, so it's pretty cool. Right, continuing, we got new library from Luke Edwards called UID, a tiny 134 bytes utility to generate random IDs of fixed length. It's very simple. So those are random, non-time based as far as I understood, but it is really fast and really tiny. So if you need to generate some random IDs for whatever case, do check this one out. It's actually pretty good. So there we go. Okay. Next thing we got here is swipeable-react, a simple React component for swipe events on touch devices. Simple as that. It basically allows you to wrap anything into swipeable, and then you will be able to use the, what was it called? The prop, not prop drilling, goddammit. Render props to render whatever you want there and pass the ref to the swipeable to handle swipes on that component. It's basically all it does, nothing super fancy. In some cases it might be easier to set it up yourself, but maybe you don't want to, or you have to do it multiple times. Maybe this will help, so check it out. Okay, next thing we got here is firebase-firestore-lite, a lightweight cloud Firestore library for the browser. So this is purely for Cloud Store. And you know, if you need the whole Firebase SDK, it's quite big, like 90 kilobytes or something. This one is, I believe, just 2 kilobytes. So if you only need Firestore and you are okay with missing some of the API, so not all of them are implemented as of now, do check this one out. It's actually really neat. And, you know, again, if you're just working with Firestore, this might be all you need and is just a couple of kilobytes, which is pretty cool. Okay. Next thing we got here is styled icons. Popular icon packs like Font Awesome, Material Design, Octi icons, available as React styled components. Yeah, so there's like a ton of different icons and available in separate packages that you can import as styled components. That seems to be, quite nice. I mean, I guess styled components means they're atomic and tree shakeable, so you can get that. I personally prefer React icons, which expose SVGs. But probably that's also a good option. I don't know, I probably should check that out and compare that to React icons because I'm curious how do they fare against each other. Okay, continuing, we got, face mask browser extension. There we go. That's an absolutely stupid extension and probably nobody should use that, but that's the thing that exists. And essentially an extension that's puts face masks on people that it finds online in the pages you browse. That's all it does. That's all it does. It's safer browser experience in the coronavirus times. It's the stupidest, but actually a really interesting source code to read. So there you go. All right, last two things we got here for today in interesting and silly things, as both of them are actually interesting. No silly stuff aside from the face mask extension. The first one is the announcement that GitHub Sponsors is now out of beta and available in 30 countries. So if you are maintaining some library that are, relatively popular, you can now just open the GitHub sponsorship and people will be able to use it to give you some money for your nice work. So there we go. And still last thing for today is personal security checklists. It's a really nice checklist of tips for protecting digital security and privacy in 2020. There's everything starting from passwords, going to two-factor authentication, to emails, social media, networking, mobile phones, personal computers, smart home, and whatever you can imagine. Everything is here. And there's some, good advices like using password managers, using 2FA where possible, switching to hardware keys if you really want high security, and so on and so forth. So if you care about security and if you always want to improve it, do check this one out. There's some really good tips there. All right, let me have a look at the chat. A lot of people watch on YouTube. I think you should use YouTube more since you don't have to upload the VOD again. 20, holy crap, 19 concurrent viewers. Okay, yeah, it seems like I should just stream on YouTube because on Twitch I currently have like 1 or 2 or something. That is insane. Okay, I was streaming on the wrong platform all this time. Anyway, that is actually it from my side. So this was BxJS episode 104. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, feel free to throw them into the chat right now. If not, we can just wrap it up here for today. As usual, you can find all the mentioned links on the GitHub or on bxjs.dev. The VOD will be available immediately after stream because, again, I'm restreaming to YouTube and Twitch now, so there's no delay anymore. I think I will have to edit it a bit to cut down the first 5 minutes or 7 minutes when I was pre-rolling the thing. But yeah, it seems like restreaming works quite well, so I'm probably going to continue streaming to both services. And yes, we also have a Discord server that you can join if you want to chat about JavaScript. I have a Twitter account where I post about JavaScript and video games. There is, what else? Oh, there's a the Telegram bot where I collect links over the week, where you can basically see everything I collect, not just the filtered stuff that gets into the final episode. And I think that's basically it. So so there's going to be a stream on Wednesday as usual with something else. I haven't really decided yet what, but we're probably going to be going forth with the GitHub proposals repository and other tickets. And yeah, that's basically it from my side. Doesn't seem like we have any more questions or suggestions. So thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for tuning in. The numbers on YouTube are insane. I love you guys so much for tuning in this to watch me. It's just crazy. So I hope you are having an awesome Saturday and you're going to have an awesome rest of the week. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you for watching. I see you on Discord or in the next stream. Have an awesome rest of the weekend or rest of the week. And I see you next time. Bye.